Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
The internet is full of half-truths and all-out lies. We've all seen them, and many people on social media complaining about it. Here's your chance to show and prove. WorldAfropedia.com is a black-owned and operated encyclopedia. There are several thousand articles, but we need help. We can't uncover all the truth ourselves. So please, join us and become a writer, editor, or blogger for WorldAfropedia.com today. Every little bit counts. We owe it to the future generations to put the truth out there. Visit WorldAfropedia.com, the African-centered encyclopedia, a global database of African knowledge for the purpose of bringing about global African wisdom and understanding. WorldAfropedia.com.
Context of white supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Sunday, October 4th, 2015. So I have been told. All of our good folks out there, if you are listening to the live program, share. You can go on Twitter, Facebook, any of the other social apps, social media that you have, and let folks know to tune in. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing with us live to share her views on the system of racism, white supremacy. There have been so many things going on. Always great to get clarity from someone who has devoted decades, at this point, half century, to discussing, dissecting, analyzing, and getting clarity about what racism is, how it works, and what black people can do to successfully solve this problem. She is the author of the ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors. I think a lot of folks saw her in the documentary series Hidden Colors. It's always a pleasure to have her on the program. Third-generation physician, general and child psychiatrist. Just always a pleasure joining us live from Washington, D.C., Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Dr. Welsing, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I'm glad to be with you this evening.
We are happy to have you. I know I speak for a lot of our listeners all over the world. We are always just incredibly grateful that you can be so gracious with your time and you're able to come and share your views with us. We really appreciate it and try to learn as much as possible. How are you doing this weekend, Dr. Welsing?
I'm doing okay. I do what Neely Fuller says, still learning.
Amen. Me too. Me too. Since we had you here on this weekend, I thought it would definitely be appropriate to begin. There was a good deal of commentary yesterday, October 3rd, in addition to 2 years to the day that Miriam Carey was killed in Washington, D.C. I think what unfortunately got a lot more attention was yesterday was the 20-year anniversary of the O.J. Simpson verdict. There was a lot of talk about that and bringing up old names, or won't say recently departed, but certainly the departed Johnny Cochran, many other aspects. I know I remembered fondly, I think one of the times you gave a lecture, you were talking about O.J. Simpson, and you said, this was before, the arrest and everything, but you said that O.J. Simpson, not clearly understanding racism, white supremacy. He was out with a group of black people at one point. He walked by some white people and they said, oh, there goes O.J. Simpson and some Negroes. And he thought, oh, wow, that was outstanding. They don't think of me as a Negro. They don't think of me as a nigger. I'm, successful. I'm O.J. Simpson. Wow. And then he saw that can change radically under a system of white supremacy. Just what do you remember about the verdict specifically, and what does that case and how that has evolved over the past 20 years, what does that teach us about racism, white supremacy?
Well, I have not, been deeply involved with reviewing that case, other than I think I didn't consider that O.J. Simpson was guilty, and I thought that the racial aspect of the situation was not looked at, and that also brings us up to what's going on in the present. There's a lot of activity going on amongst people who classify themselves as white. You might call it the far right or extremist whites, who were then and continue to do a lot of thinking about black men and white women who relate to black men, and the push that those should be killed and men should be in one way or another destroyed. And so I always thought about the case in those terms, and there's also been, I'm not the person to have all the details, but that there was an element of drug sales involved with Nicole Simmons, and so I don't know, but my thought, and I continue to think that the point of thinking, start of thinking for black people is, first of all, having an in-depth understanding and knowledge of system of racism, white supremacy, which brings us up to the case that is in Oregon and the case in Charleston, South Carolina. Both of these killers, one killed white people and another one killed black people, but at the core of their thinking and what they ended up writing about was their hatred of black people. And the fact that the media, if they mention it at all, they give very scant attention to it, and they don't spend any time going into it. And, of course, guns are involved. So that's what I have tended to focus on. To me, it's fascinating that in both of the cases, Charleston and this recent case in Oregon, where the killers, the young white males who were killing people, had as a part of their ideology a dislike and hatred of blacks. And for that to not be focused on, and I say that that's key to the role of the gun in the system of racism, white supremacy, and why there cannot be gun control. So that's where I start. So I don't know any questions you want to raise around that.
Absolutely. With the Oregon shooting, suspected gunman Christopher Harper Mercer, the information that you've seen, is he classified as a white person or a non-white person?
No, he's classified as a white person.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Why do you say that?
We were talking about that yesterday on the program, and I think even maybe the day before as well, but it came up a few times, and some of the different people had seen where he was classified as quote-unquote mixed race. And then they had a website, and they alleged, and they even, presented it this way and saying, hey, we saw this online, we haven't confirmed, so, it might not be accurate, but they said they had a website, and they said this is allegedly the shooter, and he's identifying himself as mixed race. Some of the people were seeing reports where apparently he had one white parent and one non-white parent, so I had questions about whether or not, he's accepted as white, but you said you think he's a white person, the Oregon shooter?
Well, I'll leave it open. I mean, I think it's fascinating because the reports that I heard initially were that he was white, and then I saw a picture of his father, and to all intents and purposes, he looked like a white male person, and the person I thought that they showed of his mother. So if that needs to be clarified, that will be interesting, because I thought it was interesting that the police chief said that they weren't going to show a picture of him. And I called CNN. That came over on CNN, and I called CNN and I said, wait a minute, if it's a black person, there's always a picture of him. You see, and so now this white person, and there's no picture. I think that pictures, if they have pictures of the people, they need to give the public an awareness of who the person is.
I totally agree.
See, in other words, why would you hide it? Now, the police chief said that he didn't want to make this person a star, and so therefore he's not going to mention the person's name, or, you know, they weren't going to be showing any pictures. But wait a minute, that's not it. That's not good. You see, the question is, who is it? So, you know, maybe I have to back up, but we heard on the East Coast that it was a white male.
That's fascinating. I know they do have pictures available online. They have some video as well, so you can see what the shooter looks like, suspected shooter, and he is deceased. They said, the reports I saw today, they said it was a suicide. But the report that I saw earlier today, there was at least some controversy online alleging that, I think it was CNN, alleging that some of the photos that they showed of the shooter had been altered to make him look a little bit more pale. I'll double check to make sure I'm not getting bad information, but they had a report, I just saw it earlier today, where they were alleging, and I believe it was CNN specifically, that they had altered the photo to make it look lighter, to make the shooter look lighter than he actually is.
See, so why would they do that?
Good question.
See, this whole altering of image, why? You see, why make him look lighter, or in the reverse, why make him look darker if that is what occurred? See, wasn't there some controversy about one of the images that was of O.J. Simpson where they made him look darker? You see, more menacing. This is, you know, at the time of the trial and all. And one of the publications, one of the major publications, I believe, had made his face look darker, and therefore more sinister, as a black man who was accused of killing white female.
I absolutely remember that. I think some of that had come up at other points where allegations about doing the same thing to criminalize someone by showing a darker image of them, which says a lot about consistently what you talk about in the system of racism, white supremacy. With the and if folks,
in the system for white genetic survival, you see, whether you're light or dark, white or not white, is the all-important consideration about identity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Also with the shooting, and if folks are listening in, if you've seen reports, you know, about the shooter and his racial classification, if you have information or if you've seen any pictures or what have you, definitely chime in if you have a question or comment about that, because that's really important. And I know people have been seeing a lot of different information, so please chime in if you have a question or a thought on that. Also with the shooting. And we talked about this before because there have been so many shootings in this area of the world. And you've talked about the significance, why we don't have gun control in a system of white supremacy, the importance and significance of the firearm, the gun, as a phallic symbol. That takes up a whole section in your book. What would your response be when you see, and I think this time, I think after the Charleston shooting, you see a lot of white people who come out and say, hey, we're really upset about this. We want gun control. We're tired of this. You even saw some white people who came out and applauded President Obama's speech this week where he said this routine is ridiculous. We go through this all the time. We have got to do something about this. There were white people who said, right on. Good job, President Obama. How do you make sense of that, given your stated views on racism, white supremacy, and gun control?
Well, see, I say that it doesn't matter whether we are classified as non-white or white. We are in a system, a total system, local, national, global, of racism, white supremacy. And as long as the construct of the system is not discussed, then there's always confusion about the events that take place within the system. Going back to what Neely Fuller says, if you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is, and exactly how it works, everything else that you think you understand will only confuse you. Now, I have accepted that we are in a system of racism, white supremacy, and I've gone forward to give my specific definition of racism, white supremacy as a system that is consciously and or subconsciously structured, controlling patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And this is the critical part. For the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth, a planet upon which the vast and overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white, meaning black, brown, red, and yellow, and they are genetically dominant compared in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetic recessive white-skinned people. Now, with that definition and the emphasis being on white genetic survival, because white is a genetic deficiency state, it is a mutation from black, it is a genetic recessive trait. And so for the people on planet Earth who classify themselves as white, the 1/10 minority that is white, if they did not control people of color, the vast majority of black, brown, red, and yellow people, white people could experience genetic extinction or genetic annihilation. Now, the instrument that they have evolved and developed to a high degree is a symbolic replica of male genitalia, meaning the testicle and phallus. If you look at a front view of male genitalia, you see testicle, phallus, testicle. A lateral view, you see testicle, phallus. If you turn that around 90 degrees, you see a structure that looks like a gun. The gun is essential, consciously and or subconsciously considered by the white population and the white male population in particular, that it's as though their brain computer says when they look at black males, he has weapon that can annihilate me. Must create weapon, can do same thing. And that same thing is the gun. And this is why in the white culture they call the gun the great equalizer. Meaning I have recessive genetic material. The black man has genetic dominant material. He can annihilate me. So I have to create an instrument that can kill him. And that is the gun. So as long as I am correct in my analysis of what the system is, and I'm not making up, this is not Francis Welsing School of Genetics. This is fundamental genetics that Francis Welsing learned in white schools. So as long as, it's just no question, President Barack Obama is an example of white genetic annihilation. His father was black. His mother was white. and put those two things together, the white disappears because it is a genetic recessive trait. And so this is also why when President Obama became president, what happened is what white people ended up calling the Obama effect, where there's massive purchasing of guns. Because even though at the conscious level you may have had some whites who said they want to be liberal, let's put this black man, vote for this black man to be president. But once he was in the White House with his black wife, black children, black mother-in-law, then it's almost like subconsciously the white brain computer, oh my God, what have we done? Black man in power, in the so-called most powerful seat in the world, and so then we must get our guns. And so there was massive purchasing of guns. So that if the gun serves the purpose, because whites are a turning minority on the planet, people who classify themselves as white are getting ready to be a minority in this critical area of the world called the United States of America. And so they are subconsciously, consciously up in arms about the possibility of becoming a minority in this part of the world. And so white alert, white alert, white alert is going on at subconscious levels, but people who classify themselves as white refuse to talk about racism. And this is why the black attorney general had to raise the most important question during, in the 20th century. Are we a nation of cowards being unable to talk about racism? And if racism comes up, if a black person happens to bring racism up, if some discussion in the media, the white people, you're playing the race card, shut up, we're not going to talk about race. I mean, effectively, all they say is you're playing the race card, and that's supposed to cut all conversation about race, and race is racism. The only reason that race has any significance is in a system of racism. So this is why there cannot be gun control, and certainly not a black man taking control of the guns. And so what we've seen, the gun is used by those persons in the white supremacy system who are authorized to carry guns. We've seen the massive shooting, white men killing black men, white men called so-called policemen killing black men, and saying, I thought he had a weapon, but the black man didn't have a weapon. But I thought he had a weapon. That is a subconscious reference to the fact that the black man's genital apparatus, genetic material, can cause white genetic annihilation. And the white man with a gun, he could be 6'3", and he could have 1 or 2 guns, and the black man has no gun. But the white man says, I was afraid of him. See, well, what are you afraid of? The fear is deeply embedded into the culture, the system and culture itself, which is why racism, white supremacy, is war against black people in general, non-white people, black and other non-white people are black in shades of black. But it is specific warfare against black men, because women cannot impose sexual intercourse. Only males, whether they're white, black, brown, red, or yellow, only males are able to impose sexual intercourse, because if a woman had a weapon and frightened a man, he couldn't maintain an erection. So these are the things. I called the White House and left a message. The president needs to talk to Francis Welsing. So he stops wringing his hands and, I don't know what we can do about it. better he say, well, at least I understand why there cannot be gun control. Because of what the gun represents to people who classify themselves as white at conscious and or subconscious levels. This is their instrument to protect them from white genetic annihilation, which is the most fundamental concern on the part of any person who says, I am white. That 5-letter word means I am a member of the tiny minority of white-skinned people on the planet, and my genetic makeup is recessive compared to the other people on the planet in terms of skin coloration, and I can be in annihilation. Is my fundamental survival consideration. That's what that 5-letter word means. The system is having people go in every direction and talk about everything else other than the behavior, necessity of people who classify themselves as white. So that's why people are running around scratching their heads. And the father of the gunman, the latest situation in Oregon, where the father said he never held a gun in his hand. He didn't know how his son could have gotten a hold of, all of those weapons, 14 guns. And that he thinks that there ought to be gun control, and it ought to be obvious to everybody that some kind of control of weapons. This is what the father of the gunman said. But see, that's like all of the people who've had children who were killed. And see, when there are no black people around to kill, the person gets upset. And interestingly, I think this young man was having trouble getting a girlfriend. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. I've seen those reports.
The young man in San Francisco who was part Asian and part white.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he say he was angry? How could white girls like black man, and he was lighter and not like him?
Absolutely, that's exactly.
So he was going to get a gun. See what a black man is at the center. In Charleston, South Carolina, the manifesto. And what he said as he was killing the people. I've got to kill you because you're black, and because black men want to make white women. And then the media comes on with all of this hysteria showing what Bill Cosby did 20 years ago with women who were adults who made the decision to go with a black man, but now they're accusing him of rape. And the media just goes on and on. Maybe the number's up to 500 women Bill Cosby had voluntary sex with. Who knows? But you see what I'm saying? And the reason that people are confused, as Neely Fuller said, if you don't understand white supremacy, racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you think you understand only confuse you. And see, not only that, 9 people were killed in Oregon. 9 white people were killed in Oregon. The president had the flags flying at half-staff. How many people were killed and shot in Chicago?
This week?
3 or 4 times that number.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you see, and is the world weeping and in shock? Because I mean, if you take Chicago, how many killed in New York, how many killed in Baltimore, how many killed in Washington, D.C., and you add that up, you got more than 100 people in the past week, black men shot and killed. No flags are flying at half-mast because of that, and nobody is crying about it. Black people are not crying about it, and white people are not crying about it. So the subject that's on top of the table, which is what the Attorney General said, are we a nation of cowards? Being unable to talk about racism, and as a psychiatrist, I would say, are we a nation of mentally ill people who are unable to talk about reality? And people who cannot engage reality in lay language are crazy. See, people want to talk about all these young men that do this are mentally ill. Do you know what the major mental illness amongst the American people is? The denial of racism, white supremacy, the denial of a major reality. It's just like a big elephant is in a room and people are looking at the pictures on the wall and they're looking at the pattern in floors, they're looking at the windows. The elephant is so big that he has all of them crushed up against the wall, but they won't talk about the elephant. In the late 1960s, black psychiatrists, there were a few black psychiatrists at that point talked about racism. And the black psychiatrists said to the American Psychiatric Association that the number one mental health problem was racism. That's back in the late 1960s. Fast forward, I say this is 2015. I say the major mental illness is the denial of the reality of racism. And it is the biggest reality. Just like this issue of the gun. See, when they go into discussion about there's no other major developed country that has this level of killing and gun deaths, the reason being is because the United States of America has the highest percentage of black people in a white nation, in a so-called white nation. In other words, Norway doesn't have the percentage of black. England doesn't have the percentage. Denmark doesn't have the percentage of blacks. France doesn't have the percentage of blacks. But all over Europe, they are acting up because of the number of people that are present and coming into their countries. But now you have this big influx of people that are being forced out of Syria and Afghanistan and the Middle East, all those people of color that are supposed to be flooding into Europe. And the white people in Europe, and Angela Merkel herself, the country, Germany, could no longer be considered a white nation. So this is where the discussion goes. And if, where it needs to go, and black people need to decide, wait a minute, if the people who classify themselves as white are going to go over the brink, refusing to face reality, that we as black people begin facing reality. And facing reality has a lot to do with the level of self-respect. See, our self-respect is lower than any other group of people on the planet because we're the only people who entertain ourselves by calling ourselves bitches and hoes and niggers and gangsters and thugs and dogs. The only people on the entire planet Earth who have been seduced into demeaning and degrading themselves, not to mention scandal or empire, but the only group of people on the planet who have gone along with demeaning and degrading themselves and calling it entertainment. But as Neely Fuller outlined, a system of racism, white supremacy covering all areas of people activity, economics, education, entertainment. You see, but to the extent that we as black people don't understand what's going on, we don't even see it. We participate in our own destruction, but we don't see what it is that we're doing. But I say it's critically important that we begin to see. And maybe not thinking so much about waiting for the system of racism, white supremacy to give every black person a monetary handout in terms of reparations. Is every black person who has a descendant of enslaved Africans? Yes, do trillions of dollars. But the system of racism and white supremacy is waging a war of genocide against black people. And if you understand war, reparations are not paid to the enemy. And we are perceived as the enemy of the nation that is involved in white genetic survival by any means necessary. And people who are considered to be a genetic threat to another group of people, that other group of people will begin to engage in activity that is consistent with genocide. And that is what is happening to us.
Context of white supremacy. If you have a question for Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, feel free to chime in. 641-715-3640. The code is 564943#. Press star 6 if you have a question. We'll get you on so you can ask Dr. Welsing a question, something she's brought up, or if you have something else you'd like to hear her address. Before I get my next question in, I almost feel obligated now every time because they talk so much about Bill Cosby and he's the worst person ever now. To mention Daniel Holtzclaw trial is coming up this month. That's the former Oklahoma City police officer who was exclusively raping black females. He was arrested last summer. His trial is starting in a few weeks. We've been talking about that. My reminder, I make sure folks bring that up. Every time they mention Bill Cosby, bring that up because no one talks about Daniel Holtzclaw. You mentioned the television programs and how that is another aspect of the war in terms of racism, white supremacy, and particularly the war against black self-respect, which we talk about on this program all the time, and you emphasize mightily every time that you speak about racism, white supremacy. Before I get to Empire, because you brought that up, the show How to Get Away with Murder, Viola Davis, she became the first African-American female to win an Emmy. Last week, Kerry Washington never even won for Scandal. So there was a big to-do, and she referenced Harriet Tubman when she gave her acceptance speech, and she talked about racism, and she said, you know, the only reason that Black actresses haven't won this before and been more successful. It's because they're not given the opportunity, and so many people just like, this is great. She's a darker complexion black female, so it was just really important. You don't get to see that image. She has her natural hair in the show, so just for a lot of people, they felt like it was really important, historic moment, working against racism. Within 5 days of her getting this award, the new season aired the day after the first episode of Empire for the new season. The new season airs, and Viola Davis's character is kissing a white woman who she had a lesbian relationship with previously. She's moved on from her white husband. She was married to a white man, and now she is kissing her former white female lover. What does that have to do with the system of racism, white supremacy? Why would they award a character like this?
Well, do you see, first and foremost, I would say that the people who classify themselves as white, these programs couldn't even be aired if it was not people who classify themselves as white in the control and allowing black people to engage in certain kinds of presentations of themselves. And I see those people laughing when they get together. They are laughing at us, laughing and almost falling and collapsing on the ground. Look at them. See, and they're playing us like a violin because we think it's about getting on TV and making money. That's an incorrect analysis of a system that is about racism, white supremacy. So the system of racism, white supremacy wants to portray black people in the most depraved way that can possibly be done. And we don't understand it, or black people will say this is keeping it real. Well, what's real is the distorted form that the system of racism, white supremacy has put us in. It's just like instead of letting people who could be 6'5", instead of letting them walk tall, from the time they're born, you put them in a cage, so they have to be all crumpled up and look deformed. And then the people who put them in the cage start laughing at the deformity and looking at them. And the people in the cage, since they were there since birth, they think their deformity, well, this is keeping it real. This is who I really am. I looked at the cover of Ebony magazine, and it just had some black women on it, and it says, badass. Badass. Black fashions. We don't get it. We don't get it, but the world gets it. The white people get it. And so when they decide to close 50-something schools in Chicago, because look at these people. This is life unworthy of life. These people don't need schools. They don't need housing. They don't need to remain in the urban centers that are now being gentrified for intelligent, creative people. This is what the white people say the new urban centers are for. Intelligent, creative people. So when white people see these images, yeah, we don't want them in our urban centers. Now, one way we can accomplish it is build expensive condominiums. Go visit Washington and see all the expensive condominiums that are up in the areas where black people used to live, work, and play, that black people cannot afford to buy or to rent, as they're being pushed out into the Bantu stands. Again, if we don't understand it, in the Empire series, didn't they have a gorilla being let down in a cage?
I think they had. I don't watch Empire, but I think they had one of the main characters dressed like a gorilla.
In a gorilla?
Right, and they had Al Sharpton and Don Lemon actually are all in the same episode that set records and had a lot of millions. What do you think the significance was of them having both Don Lemon and Al Sharpton in the same episode where I think it was a black female, is dressed like a gorilla and in a cage?
What have white people historically said about black people?
Planet of the Apes.
That they're monkeys. See, a long time ago when I said Empire, white people looking at it were seeing Planet of the Apes. I didn't know that they were going to have some black person come down in a gorilla suit. But white people get the message. And see, because we don't understand, so-called black leaders are brought in to do a cameo, and that means that leader is included too. But the leader just thinks, oh, I'm on TV, I'm in this episode. Isn't this nice? See, study the history of Nazi Germany. When Adolf Hitler wanted Europe to be white and pure, he said all of the people that are classified as non-white, whether they think they're white or not, but if I classify them as non-white, they're going in the oven. And the way that I'm going to get the surrounding German population to go along with it, I'm going to have a whole propaganda apparatus. And I'm going to show despicable images of Jewish people so that the German population would get accustomed to seeing them as Tiermensch. That's German for subhuman. The person who came down in the cage in the gorilla suit was a statement, these are subhumans. See, what did the philosopher, English-American philosopher George Santayana said, those who do not learn from history will repeat history. And somebody put that sign over the 1,000 people who were killed in Jonestown, the 1,000 black people who were murdered in Jonestown. Because they thought white Jim Jones loved them. But white Jim Jones was in cahoots with elements in the government that allowed those black people to be taken out of the San Francisco area and their welfare checks sent to Jim Jones in Guyana. And to prevent a congressman from coming back and reporting on what happened, Leo Ryan, he was killed. He went down there to investigate, and he was killed, along with the 1,000 dead black people. The black people thought that Jim Jones, white minister, liked them. The black people in Charleston, South Carolina, 2015, June the 17th, when a young white man came into their prayer meeting, sat with them for an hour and prayed with them. The black people were so happy and came to their church and was with them, because Jesus is also white. The young white man got up after spending an hour with them, pulled out his gun, and killed 6 black women and 3 black men. Now see, if we had a passing score in black self-respect, and especially since the young white man said, I have to kill you because you're black. And in his manifesto, he said that other white people were talking about the race war. Well, he was going to do something to get it started. Isn't that what he said in his manifesto?
Yes, ma'am.
If we had a passing score in black self-respect, not that black people would be yelling and talking about we hate white people. No, but black people would be sitting alert, turn off the music, turn off the dance records, and calling in their rooms, and saying that every black person present, every black person in the community, and every black person that they know against the understained racism, white supremacy, and what it is and how it works and what it will do to you if you are perceived as a genetic threat to white genetic survival.
Context of white supremacy. I know one of the big stories at the end of last week, in fact, when it broke, I went back and went through the archives to get one of your previous visits to get some of your commentary on John Boehner, House Speaker. He's stepping down. He announced his resignation last Friday, and we had been discussing him stepping down and, why he chose to leave and what factors were influencing his departure. And I referenced some of your commentary because you've talked about him quite a few times in your visits to the cows over the years. And you talked about his skin complexion and him being from Ohio and the history of that area of the world and how a lot of the enslavers, they would send the offspring when they raped the black...
Big
Exactly. They would send them to the Ohio area, and you think that that influences John Boehner's skin complexion, why he looks the way that he does. And we were talking about why he's leaving now, and I said, man, I cannot wait to ask Dr. Welsing what's her theory on why he's leaving, and if you think that's in any way connected to if he was sufficiently angry and sufficiently effective at going after President Obama, if that had anything to do with why he's stepping down.
Well, he went after President Obama, do you see, but at the same time, he was being disrespected by other people in the more right-wing, the further conservative wing of the Republican Party. So he wasn't able to, if he wanted to in some way cooperate with the president, he was getting static for doing so. Do you see? But I say that when he was involved in disrespecting the president also, earlier on in the president's administration, that he was being... See, I think that he had to be teased by other white people because of his dark complexion. They were always asking him why was he dark and did he have a tan, and he said he didn't have a tan, and his wife even said that's not a tan, that's his color. And he said that there were 11 children in his family. And 4 of them took their color after their mother. Now, I don't know whether, just like there's statistics in the government where they keep the records on the people and their racial classifications. Do you see, because of the level of race mixing that went on with white slave masters having sex with African women, and the light-skinned people and those who could pass and eventually be woven into the white population, that there's a sizable segment of the people who classify themselves as white who actually have black ancestry. But they don't talk about it because they are passing for white, or they didn't really know that they had black ancestry, like J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover apparently came from a mixed-race black family in, I believe, Mississippi. And I mean, anybody looking at J. Edgar Hoover will have to say, he almost looks like he's a brother. But he was hostile and vicious towards black people. Hostile and vicious towards Reverend Martin Luther King. And upset because Martin Luther King was supposed to have had some kind of sexual liaison with a white woman.
What do you think it's significant when they have been talking over the past 7 days about who possibly could replace Congressman Boehner as the speaker? And one of the names that's been floated is Steve Scalise. He's currently the GOP whip in Congress. And at least for me, what I thought was interesting was I said, wait a minute, weren't they just talking about him at the beginning of the year being the white guy who had went and spoke to this like white supremacist, I think they were using the term white nationalist group, about a decade ago at the early part of the 2000s. They were just talking about him. There was no discipline. He didn't get in trouble. It was just, oh, I don't remember, or maybe I did. That was a long time ago. Let's not bring up old stuff. And they just moved forward, and now they're saying that he could replace John Boehner as the new Speaker of the House. Have you seen that? Did you think that was significant at all?
Well, again, you see, let's say if black people, if we thought about, we are at a chessboard, and we are on the black side of the chessboard, and the white side of the chessboard is playing a continuous game of racism, white supremacy. So if you're sitting at the chessboard, you know that all of the moves that are being made on the other side of the board are part of the game of chess, and are part of all the games in chess are about white king, checkmate, black king. That's why white always plays offense, defense, and the black side of the board has to play defense, offense. And so, in other words, there's never black sitting looking at the white side of the chessboard. If you have a skilled player, none of the moves that are made on the person playing the white side of the chessboard, all of it is about the game of chess. Even looking at how the person's facial expression, trying to judge from their facial expression about what move are they going to make against the black side of the chessboard. Not what move are they going to make against their own pieces. If they make a move against their own pieces, that's considered a major mistake. It's just like in the game of football. One team is not thinking that some idle move is being made on the other side of the field. All moves are being made in behalf of that team winning the game. You see, whatever moves, and again, see, as long as people who classify themselves as white are hiding and denying racism, they're playing racism. And black people, see, we go around scratching our head, meeting each other and saying, hey, what's happening? Because we don't know what's going on. But the people who classify themselves as white know what's going on. I mean, a white person said to me, Dr. Welsing, if you say that whites are a tiny minority and the non-white people are overwhelming majority on the planet, how is it that we, whites, that are a tiny minority, can control the whole planet? And I said, well, you know, considering everything, maybe we have to conclude that you're smarter. But I don't think you're smarter. What I do think is that you were able to, starting in the 15th century, 1492, Columbus circumnavigated the planet and started other Europeans going around the planet and discovering what was on the planet. And they discovered that what they discovered was not just land, but who was on the land. Not just discovering India, but what did the people look like who were in India. And so they discovered that every place else on the planet other than Europe, the people were all people of color. And if the men had sex with the women and waited 9 months, they found out that all the children looked like the mothers, because color, the ability to produce melanin pigment, is a genetically dominant trait. And so from there, they figured out, well, wait a minute, if we're not going to be genetically undone, we better dominate and control. We have no choice other than to dominate and control all of the people of color. So I said to the white person, you circumnavigated the planet. Now, see, people who don't have a fear of genetic annihilation, and black people, and the most black people have no fear of genetic annihilation from some other group of people. See, what black people did was, under white supremacy, trying to be accepted by whites, took on don't marry anybody darker than yourself and try to get as light as possible and try to make as light children as you possibly can so that they will have a better opportunity under racism, white supremacy. And that's still the philosophy among, I would say, vast majority of black people. And you even have the rap artists talking about not marrying dark women, which is absolutely disgraceful. But anyway, so the white people figured out what to do on the planet. Not what to do in just Europe, but what to do all over the planet. So because they're thinking planetary, and we might be thinking neighborhood, there's no way that we can keep up with people who are thinking about the whole kit and caboodle and what they have to do in relationship to the whole kit and caboodle. Just like they found water on Mars, and so, you know, they're going to go to Mars, and the first thing they're going to be interested in, and they used to put that in the comic strips when I was growing as a child, you know, going into outer space with their ray gun and seeing if they encounter any green or purple people, meaning any colored people. So when they get to Mars, they'll be scouting around. If there's water, there may be people. Well, what color are the people?
Context of White Supremacy, author of the ISIS Papers, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. If folks have questions you would like to ask, the number again, 641-715-3640. The code is 564-943-29. pound. Press star 6 if you would like to participate. The person that dialed in, last 4 digits, 9769. 9769. Did you have a question for Dr. Welsing? Your line should be open.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings, Gus, and greetings, Dr. Welsing.
Greetings.
Dr. Welsing, how do you think the system of white supremacy will respond to the declining birth rates of white people?
Well, they are responding to it as we are speaking. In other words, just turn on your television and you see all the people in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, all those people of color that are being killed, and then if you can get what's happening on the continent of Africa, and all the people in Nigeria, different parts of Africa that are supposedly being attacked by strange name groups. But they're being killed and they're being starved, or they're being subjected to chaotic conditions, and so they have to flee their land. You see, and then you just add to that the number of people of color in Brazil and different places. So Neely Fuller has spoken of population tailoring, cutting down the numbers of people of color, or the Ebola virus being deployed in West Africa. See, it would be naive for us to, and this is why it's very important for black people to read and 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 turn off the TV as much as they can and read and read. See, it's all kinds of books. I just left a bookstore a little while ago. All kinds of books. And people should read so that they become familiar with what is happening on the planet. But the people that are being killed on the planet, see, people are not being killed in France. People are not being killed in Norway or Sweden or Denmark. But people of color are being killed on this planet. People in Washington, people in Detroit, people in Chicago, people in New York. People of color are being killed. And so, see, if black people, and this is what Eric Holder, the Attorney General, are we a nation of cowards being unable to talk about racism? See, I can ask a caller, like what percentage of the black people that you know are comfortable talking about racism? Caller?
Oh, I'm sorry?
I was asking what percentage of people that you know, if you're black, what percentage of people that you know are comfortable talking about racism?
Oh, not many people that I know of.
See, right, not many people. So people don't want to talk about the reality, but if black people would just begin, that's almost like having a trump card. But black people are afraid of the reaction of white people. They're afraid if I talk about racism, the white people I know that I work for, they'll be upset and they won't like me. And so I'm not going to talk about it and I'm going to act like it's not there. You see, but if black people elevated their self-respect to the point that they are talking about truth and reality, and they don't have to be hostile towards white people, but they are just saying, I am aware of what the people who classify themselves as white on the planet are doing, have done for 500 years to black people. And so out of my respect for myself, I have to reflect on this and think about this. That in itself would do a lot to stop the play. I mean, to some extent. You see, meaning, it's just like if you were playing chess and you say to your opponent, I know what move you're going to make next. And if you're correct, then the opponent has to modify their strategy or deploy a different tactic. And so that, our fear of talking about the reality, I don't want to look at it, it's like they used to talk about the ostrich putting his or her head in the sand. If they hear a big noise, instead of facing it, they try to dive under the sand. I don't know if they actually do it, but that's what people used to say.
Did that answer your question, caller?
That did answer my question. Thank you, Dr. Welsing. Thanks, Gus.
Okay, thank you.
For sure. The person that called in from a blocked number, did you have a question for Dr. Welsing? You should be with us. Oh, maybe I didn't. Let's try that again. Person that called in from a blocked number, are you there? How strange. Try that again.
Hello, you muted me. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
You muted me.
We can hear you.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to ask a question, a couple questions. One, I'm in a dilemma, and I wanted to know, with regards to racism and white supremacy, I'm having a kind of conflict with another black person, and what they're doing is they're trying to say that somehow that I am. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, speak as distinctly and as slowly as you can so I can, because it seems like it's running together.
Thank you. I'm having a conflict with another black person. They're saying that I'm playing along or somehow participating in like a game in this conflict, and I feel like the person is. I feel like it's like when a man and a woman who's being assaulted by a man and has been assaulted by a man, and they go, oh, you wanted it, you wanted it, you were playing along with it, and I feel like I'm kind of being assaulted in that way by a black person. What does
You're
that?
A black person being assaulted by another black person?
I'm in conflict with someone.
And I
feel as if, I feel as if when they make comments with regards to I'm going along or I'm playing along with this conflict, and I'm not taking the conflict seriously as if I'm participating as if it's a game. I feel like someone who's been, like a woman who's been assaulted, and the person goes, oh, you wanted it, or you're playing along with it. As if I'm not taking this conflict is very, very serious, like I'm playing along with it. Go ahead.
Let me just ask you this. Does the person want you to engage in a discussion about racism and you are resistant doing so? Is that what is happening?
No. Maybe I should leave it.
What's the discussion about?
Maybe I should talk to you at a different time in regards to it. But one thing that I did want regards to everything that's going on with Katrina, with regards to everybody, this is a separate, different question. With regards to what everyone is now reviewing Katrina and going and understanding what happened with Katrina, the truth about Katrina. What is it that we can do? I mean, the mental aspect. What is it that we can do where we understand that the first thing we have to do and what has to be done in Louisiana is that we have to make it to the point where the levees have to be fixed so the flooding can never occur again, or most likely not occur again. Why aren't we dealing with that being the first remedy that we have to do? Is nothing else. The first thing we have to do is we have to make sure that those levees don't break and the floods don't happen. Why aren't we logically looking at this? Because we're going all around doing everything else except dealing with the problems. If they can flood, we can build that area again. But if it floods again, the same thing is going to happen.
Okay, Mr. Jefferson, would you please repeat? Because I don't know if it's static or what, but would you repeat what you understand her question, Steve?
My understanding, I think this was a totally separate issue from what she first brought up, so this is a totally different question. She said in reviewing what happened with Hurricane Katrina and the levee failure, she said that she thinks that the thing that we should be focused on is making sure that the levees have been repaired so that this never happens again, this failure and catastrophic flooding. And she said, why isn't that the major focus? Why isn't that the thing that we're our number one priority, making sure that levees are totally repaired and totally capable of preventing any further flooding similar to what happened in 2005? Why aren't we focused on that?
Why focus on the levees in contrast to focusing on what?
It's just focusing on we're saying we're rebuilding, we're getting the place back together, we're cleaning up, we're building new housing. And it's like, yeah, but if the levees break again, you're going to be back at square one. Why aren't they concerned about? To me, that would be the most concern. That's the one thing when we talk about Katrina, I don't hear anybody saying that. Saying things like, why, in regard to race and white supremacy, why do it's like we lack wisdom in that area? The first thing you do is make sure that the levees are going to hold. The problem has been fixed. Then you're going to clean up and rebuild. Isn't that the most logical thing? And why are we not logical?
Let me say this. If you have 10 people sitting in a room, they might have 10 different ideas about what is the problem that ought to be focused on. And so maybe out of the 10, maybe there are 2 people who agree about what to focus on. And so instead of having the 10 people squabbling and squabbling and squabbling and squabbling with each other, if the 2 people who are in agreement said, well, this is what we think and this is what we are going to do. Maybe it's only one person out of the 10 that sees, has an idea about what, and nobody else agrees with them. And that one person said, well, I'm going to do what I can as one person. Maybe I'll write some letters to the newspaper. Maybe I'll talk to the people at my church. I'm the only one who seems to think this is a problem, so I'm going to use my life energy doing what I can as one person. Maybe other people will join me, maybe not. But this is what I'm going to do. And it's very, very important for black people to do what they can in terms of, racism and white supremacy. We go back to when we were on the plantation. And so you might have had 150 slaves on the plantation and at most 6 people in the big house. And so that minority in the big house had to figure out how are they going to keep the enslaved Africans for joining together and rebelling and throwing over the big house. So they had various and sundry ways of having the people compete with each other and fight with each other and squabble with each other and snitch on each other, so that there would always be conflict and confusion amongst the 150 for the security of the big house. So arguing and squabbling and disagreeing is a common feature of the interaction amongst black people and any other group of people who are still in a state of oppression. Now, to break the oppression, they need to begin to understand the more we fight and squabble with each other, the more discourteous and disrespectful we are with each other, the weaker we become. And the weaker we become adds strength to the system of oppression. But when we learn to stop squabbling with each other, name-calling each other, cursing each other, gossiping about each other, being discourteous, being disrespectful, all of that, the stronger we become. Because going back to that question that the white person raised, how is it that as 1/10 we can control the 9/10? And if they make the 9/10 hate themselves, love the oppressor, and then squabble with one another, then it is as though the numerical strength of the majority has actually been given to the minority. And so out of your question, I would say, if people that you know are not interested in doing what you do, what you think is important, use your creativity and intelligence and say, well, now this is what I'm going to do on my own. And I'm not going to spend any energy being critical of the people who won't do it with me. I'm just going to keep doing it on my own. I'm the only psychiatrist in the United States of America who has been talking nurses and white supremacy for the last 40 years. I'm the only one in the entire world. Now that to me is very sad, but it happens to be a fact. And if I hadn't decided, well, if nobody else is going to talk about it and think about it, because it seems to be important to me. I started out as a psychiatrist wondering what was causing black people to be mentally ill. It wasn't being taught by the white people who were in charge of the training program. They taught us, the 2 blacks and the 10 or 12 whites, that black people didn't have the intelligence to benefit from psychotherapy. But I'm a 3rd-generation physician. So on my own, I started wondering what I want to try to figure out as a black psychiatrist, what's causing black people to be mentally ill. And when I came across the idea that racism is in their history, this must be a big problem for us, I'm going to find out what it is. I didn't have anybody with me have lost jobs because of it. So I'm just saying to you, if something comes to you, this is important, and this is what I think. Have the courage of your convictions. And if nobody travels with you, you travel by yourself. I've had people come up to me and say, Dr. Welsing, I heard you 20 years ago. I knew you were crazy. Now I understand what you're talking about. 20 years passed. I had a colleague say, you've talked about this for 40 years. Now I'm finally understanding. You see, so I would just say, please have the courage of your own convictions. And if you think focusing on the levees is important, then you make yourself some flyers and you go to Kinko's and Xerox and make yourself 150 flyers and say, I'm going to pass these out in the community and help people think about what I think is important for some of us to be focusing on. Do you understand?
I think she took your answer offline, but
Okay.
it was clear. And if it was not, feel free. You can dial in and get clarification. Before I get to the next call, I just wanted to ask. I know it had been the second Thursday of the month. Is the Welsing Institute is that coming up this week?
Yes, on Thursday. Mm-hmm.
Outstanding. Is it still on the campus of Howard?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Outstanding. So it's this coming Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, campus of Howard University?
Yes, in the Blackburn Center. Mm-hmm.
Blackburn Center, that Thursday, October 8th. If you're in the D.C. area or think you might be in the neighborhood close to Thursday the 8th, go check out the Welsing Institute. Great information. Some of the points we talked about today might be brought up. Will be good to get out. Always great to get constructive information if you're in the D.C. area this Thursday or any of the second Thursdays of the month for the Welsing Institute. Person that dialed in, retired firefighter in Florida. Did you have a question for Dr. Welsing? Your line should be open.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Welsing. Good evening, Gus.
Good evening.
Regular callers. I have two questions to ask. Starting with the first one, it's a black self-respect issue. I'm a retired firefighter, as Gus said, but I'm also been a high school football coach and assistant for over 30 years. The place where I'm currently working at, in the entire program, coaches as well as players, everybody would be considered to be non-white black. Quote-unquote adults as well as the students. There is one of the kids is very well melanated in what I've heard you say identify as crystal black, which I agree should be, a picture of him should be up in my house somewhere. But at the same time, under the system of racial white supremacy, I have around me a lot of non-white people who are somewhat confused on the system of racial white supremacy, and they identify him as Spade.
Yes.
The question is,
I didn't
without
say identify him as. I didn't hear what you said.
They identify him as the nickname of Spade.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am. The question that I would like to ask you is, I'm very careful about discussing directly to one of these gentlemen about this subject because to avoid debate and or argument with another non-white person. The only thing that I basically do when I hear it comes up, I just say, well, his name is Dimitri, because that is his name, and go from there. Do you have any suggestions so I can have like a game plan to get this issue corrected?
Yes. I have a list of prohibitions that came from the work of Neely Fuller that he called counter-racist behavior. And I have called them exercises in black mental health and black self-respect.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
They are stop name-calling one another, stop gossiping about one another, stop cursing one another, stop being discourteous and disrespectful to one another, stop snitching on one another, stop stealing from one another, stop robbing one another, stop fighting one another, stop killing one another. Those are like the basic ones. And I would say if you just maybe put up a sign in the locker room that says exercises in black mental health and black self-respect.
Okay.
And then say, self-respect is, and the respect for others is black power. I don't know if you could say that. Whether that would create, you could say that. Self-respect and self-respect and respect for others is black power.
Yes.
Do you see? So you put a big, like a nice printed sign that just says that, and put it up and don't say anything about it initially. Do you see? And somebody will come and say, where does this come from? What's this all about?
They would know it comes from me.
You say what?
They would know it comes from me.
Okay, fine. Okay. See, that's great. That's great. Do you see? But I'm saying to black people that we can overturn the system of racism, white supremacy with black self-respect. See, black self-respect is more powerful than a nuclear weapon.
I know that's right.
But you just want to maybe gently get the people on the team. And you might even say, you know what? Physicists are looking for the perfect black. The Egyptian god Osiris was called Lord of the Perfect Black. And you say, there are people who say that the pigment melanin has something to do with the people being able to put up the pyramids. You can say, I don't know whether that's true or not, but there are some scientists that are suggesting that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see? And you don't necessarily, it's somebody who plays cards. Is a spade a powerful card in the deck?
I think it is. I'm not much of a card player myself, but I think I remember that ace is being probably one of the most powerful cards, yes.
But see, don't deal with that, don't just say, and just put up, if that makes any sense to you, if you give me your address, I'll send you the list.
Oh, I have it. I'm quite familiar with
okay, wonderful. Okay.
I'm quite familiar with it. Yes, ma'am. And that's a very, very good idea. I'd just like to say, actually, the only people that I hear calling this child by this name is not the other kids. It's some of the coaches.
Yeah, because they'll be nervous. They'll be nervous. See, if you say black self-respect, some people get, what are this? Well, what do you mean by that?
Right. That's why I'm kind of careful about the young.
Yes, that self-respect has a lot to do with people who win games. Self-respect has a lot to do with how much courage a person has.
Yes, ma'am. I don't have any problem in doing it, but I just want to avoid the issue of it going to a quote unquote debate and or argument on the subject. I kind of sense that's where it would go. I would kind of bring up the subject or keep talking about it. That it may go to there as far as that. So, it's a white male that's on the staff that some of the callers know about it because I have a weekly report on him when we do workplace racism. And I asked the question to one of them: would it be okay if this coach calls him that? In his silence when I asked that question. Silence when I asked the question. But, yes, ma'am.
Well, there was a black male teacher in Baltimore, and he took that list of behaviors and put it up in the classroom, and he was beginning to help the children. And the white principal said, this doesn't have anything to do with math, take it down.
Yes, I can see
but
that.
it was beginning to help the young people in their relationships with one another.
Right. The other question. Thank you for your suggestion, and I'm going to put up those points up on in the coach's office.
Okay.
And just see what the reaction I would get from it. The other one is about Burger King, which is it's a South Florida-based company. It's actually international. I don't know if you know it or not. A lot of times I watch television, like right now. I have it on, but a lot of times I have the sound turned off. And I'm looking, and I see this commercial. It's been airing now for about 2 weeks now about Burger King, and they're supposed to be commemorating the white initiated holiday that's called Halloween, and everything looks normal about this mainstay part of their menu, which is the Whopper, except for the bun is crystal black. It's crystal black.
Except for the what? I didn't hear that.
The bun that's on the Whopper, the bread.
I see.
To commemorate, quote unquote, Halloween. I don't know if you've observed this. It's been on now. I've noticed the commercial now. It's been on for about maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I was just curious if you've seen it. Would you have any comment on it about its bun being? I mean, it's literally it's crystal black, the color of the bun. I would eat nothing like that because I figure it had to be dyed or something like that in order to get that way. But would there be any significance to it to you?
I would want to give that. I would want to give that some thought. I mean, what would be interesting is how people react to it.
Mm-hmm.
You see, instead of the bread being white or, whatever color a bun is, brown and whatever, that you're saying that the bun is white, is black, I'm sorry?
It's totally, it's black. It is, I would say, if I had to put something on before black, I would call it crystal black, and that's how dark it is, the bread. They show the Whopper. They show the Whopper in the commercial, and it says that they're commemorating Halloween. And
well, let me say this.
Go ahead.
See, I would imagine it would be fascinating to go to the Burger King company and to sit in the conference room when they were discussing what was going to be the Halloween product and what kind of comments were being made. There had to be significant agreement amongst mostly white people, I would imagine, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That decided that we are going to go forward with this product for the Halloween season.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have talked about people who classify themselves as white really are desirous, just like they suntan, are desirous of having dark skin. As a symbolic consequence, one of the things that they like to do is to ingest dark substances, like coffee. That's how Starbucks is a billionaire company, because, pouring dark substance into their body, pouring Coca-Cola into their body, eating chocolate. And the darker the chocolate, the more it's liked. Do you see? So Valentine's Day, then you have the darkest chocolate cake you can possibly find, and ingesting that. So this is why, it's fascinating. I haven't seen the commercial.
Yes.
But the commercial is not being directed primarily. I'm sorry?
I said, and the Whopper is designed to devour it, to eat it. Bun and all. Yes.
See, I just think that's fascinating. For example, do you know what Adolf Hitler, who was an arch white supremacist, do you know what his favorite thing he liked to eat was?
I'm not sure.
Chocolate.
Wow. Not surprised.
One time he was asked why he didn't wear the lederhosen, those leather shorts that the Germans wear. And he said his legs were too white.
Mm.
So don't get upset. Just tell them enjoy their ebony buns. Oh, wow. No pun intended.
I thought about you when I saw it. I saw the commercial. Yes.
So just say this is fascinating. This is, the majority of the people that are going to be eating Burger King black buns are white people.
Mm. Yeah, the company is not too far from where I stay at. It's overlooks my international airport. The company building.
LeVar, would you repeat that? I didn't hear that.
I just said the Burger King, the company building, the headquarters, is not very far from where he resides down in South Florida.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Right on. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Yes, sir. Appreciate that. Let's see. The caller at 8562. 8562. Did you have a question for Dr. Welsing? Your line should be open.
Yes. Hello. Greetings, everyone. I'm learning a lot tonight about black buns. This is very interesting. I have a question for Dr. Welsing, but before I ask my question, I would like to make a statement and implore everybody listening and everybody tell everybody to stop letting their kids play the games on the internet. All the games. Just stop doing it. Just totally stop. Because it's programming the kids. It's got subliminal programming in it to me. And it's got behavioral conditioning in it to me. And this type of thing. Make the kids nervous and stuff. And I observed some kids playing the game on the internet over the weekend. The little kids, like 5 or 6 years old. And I would like to ask implore all parents to stop letting the kids play all games on the internet. Just stop that totally. Okay. Now, the question I have for Dr. Welsing. Hello, Dr. Welsing. How are you?
Yes, hello. How are you?
All right. The question I have for Dr. Welsing is, I operate as a substitute teacher during the day in a public school environment in junior high. So the kids are mostly, let's say, 11 to 14. Okay. I noticed that when I go to the Jackson Public School District, that the kids are unruly. I mean, it literally takes, out of an hour and a half class, it literally takes 20 or 25 minutes to call a roll. My question is, what is wrong with their psychology to the point where you can't even get their attention, really? It's like they have a bad attention span, they ask to go to the bathroom, and this type of thing, and it's just not conducive to a class environment. My question is there something I could be doing? What is the psychology in it, like for the kids and stuff?
Well, I think that several things are going on. I think that because of the impact of racism on black family structure, because of unemployment of black men, which often leaves single-parent households, and so children are not getting the behavioral conditioning from their parents. You see, sometimes I'm in Washington, D.C., and sometimes I look at the Hispanic families. Now, Hispanic men in the urban centers that I see, they get jobs, building the highway or doing construction and that kind of thing. And so those men have jobs and they can go home and play the role of husband and father. And very often, just looking at the Hispanic women and their children, the women are walking, holding the hands of their children. Always holding the hands of the children, you see, and then you, by contrast, you might see black children running in a harem-scarum, uncontrolled behavior. Now, I'm not saying that the black parents are bad parents. There's different conditioning because it's different situations. If you have a household where you have two parents and the parents are getting along in a constructive way with each other, that impacts children one way. If you have a community or a street in which the majority of homes have two parents, which means they're adult behavior guides for male and female children. But if you if you by contrast have a street or community and 70% of the fathers are missing, and there are no behavior guides for male children, then after the male child is 3 or 4 years old, the single female parent is being overwhelmed by male assertiveness in children. They're running and jumping, and then they start screaming and yelling at the children. I'm not saying 100%, but I'm saying that our children are being bombarded with inappropriate influences if you want to have calm behavior on the part of children. I'm not going to say that children are bad. Children don't create their parents. They don't create the situations that they grow up in. They are conceived and then they are produced, and there they are to whatever is impacting them from the external environment. So if I had a magic wand and I could wave my magic wand in this system of racism as it impacts us as black people, no black person would be able to have sex until they were married, and they could not get married until they were in their 30s, and in the meantime they would be going to school. So that in a way you are making certain that you have maturity on the part of parents, as opposed to somebody having a child when they're 15 years old. And no 15-year-old can take care of a child for 25 years. And so they're soon overwhelmed. And when they get overwhelmed, they start yelling and screaming and yanking and name-calling the children. And then add to that the material that, as you say, that is on the Internet or the video games, where it's nothing but shooting and chaos and fighting, plus whatever subliminal material is in, if I can wave another magic wand, the only music that black people would be listening to are the songs from either the early black church, not the church that's yelling and screaming, but the early black church where the people were singing hymns and more quiet songs, and the music from the civil rights era. Because if you contrast, somebody can play music that came out of the civil rights, We Shall Overcome, or Put Your Hand on the Plow, Hold On, and those encouraging songs, Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around, just the tone and the rhythm has one kind of impact on behavior versus the boom, to the boom, to the boom, to the boom. Do you understand what I'm saying? That does a completely different thing to the nervous system.
Yes, ma'am. Let me also ask this. Now, you saying that as single parent, okay, but it's been single parent. Black women been having children, and they've been single parents. But what's the difference between being and what they got on their mind now? I don't understand. Like,
okay, well, let's look at
psychology of the whole.
Okay, well, look at this a minute. When you say there used to be single parenting, and people were going to Sunday school, right? How many people are going to Sunday school now? And I'm not being an advocate for religion, but I'm talking about institutions that incorporate behavior control as opposed to just running wild. Do you see? So in the past, when there might have been single-parent households, in the past when they had single-parent households, they might have also had grandparents or grandmother in the home, where you had older people helping in the home to take care of children. I heard a young woman on the radio, black radio, the other day, talking about how young women who join gangs, young black women who join gangs, and this young person who said they were a part of that culture, black, said that the parents, you've got so many mothers who are on crack cocaine now, and single parents, and so they are on drugs and they can't take care of and control the children, and children coming from this and young females coming from that are joining gangs and becoming as tough and crude and mean and violent as they can possibly be to earn street creds, as they say. Do you see? So there are things that, in other words, the system of racism, white supremacy on its own is not structured for the maximization of the black genetic and constitutional potential. It is structured so as to produce the inferiorization of black people. And to the extent that we don't know that there is system-level impact on us and on everything that we do. For example, we're looking at some of the black behavioral scientists are looking at the epidemics of male and female homosexuality and raising the question, what is influencing this? Is this a chemical influence from the environment? Is it a deliberate chemical attack of some kind? But the point is that we are seeing epidemic levels of a feminization of black males that you didn't see 30 years ago. See, in all of these things, if men are being male, if you take males out of a household, adult males, male children do not know how to model their behavior behind. And some people are saying, the long hair on the part of men, the 2 diamond earrings in the ear, all of this is coming from a young male child looking at the mother getting dressed in the morning to go to work. See, people sometimes think that style is something they're doing on their own. But if you don't have power in that environment, and other people have power in the environment so that they can shape and mold your behavior. And see, all of these, if black males are being effeminized, and if in other words, you don't see anybody encouraging white males to be gay, but you have a dynamic in the society encouraging black males to be gay and fussing at the black churches because they may not be endorsing male homosexuality. Nobody is pushing that on the rabbis in the synagogues or in the Buddhist temple. But to the extent that black males are effeminized, then you are leading black people to genocide. So there are all kinds of influences, and if we don't have insight into the dominant power structure in the society, then we think that we're doing certain things. I mean, it's just like you are seeing young children becoming addicted to the video games and the internet with their cell phones, where they can't stop looking at it. So that doesn't begin. Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I think I was going to say, Dr. Welsing, I believe that's why they put music on cell phones, so they could play that in the class and the kids could get distracted and put their headphones on. I have to tell them every day, don't take your phones out. And you
have to keep saying it over and over. Last night I was talking about this with some people who had just attended a political meeting. I said pretty soon they're going to have messages such on the cell phones. I love you. Oh, you are really wonderful. Oh, I love you so much. Now what I want you to do is, now if you're not getting love at home, and somebody can skillfully put those kind of messages on, then I love you so much. Nobody loves you as much as I do. Now what I want you to do, I want you to go out in the street and riot.
Dr. Welsing, I believe they already have that with Siri. You notice all the people that the automated voices that they come out with is a woman. Siri and all this other type of stuff is communicating with these people. Okay. All right.
But do you see what I'm saying? So in other words, this is why when Eric Holder, I keep going back to the former Attorney General, are we a nation of cowards being unable to talk about racism? Because if black people can't begin to talk about racism, examining racism, becoming very sophisticated about what it is and how it works, our number is up. Our number is up as certain as the Native Americans' number was up and the Semites of the Jewish religion. Their number was up. They had a Sigmund Freud over there in Austria, and he was talking about everything other than anti-Semitism. And that's what took them out.
Thank you kindly, Puff. See if we can nab the next person that dialed in. The caller at last four digits, 9498. 9498. Did you have a question for Dr. Welsing? You should be with us.
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Dr. Welsing. Hi, I just wanted to know if you could... Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I just wanted to know if you could kind of elaborate on maybe teenagers or young adults having children before the age of 30. I only say that because I was reading an article, and a young male, I guess he's 21, he was sentenced to life for killing his the mother of his children because they were garnishing his wages.
Wait a minute, go back. He was sentenced to life because, I'm sorry.
He killed his, he drove. Okay, no problem. He drove from Texas to Sacramento to call his children's mother. He had 3 children with her. He's 21, she's 33. Because he said that child support was taking all of his check, and he was only left with maybe $161, and he made $8.50. There were a lot of different comments on it, but I just wanted you to maybe, just from knowing that he stated that she manipulated him or whatever, but he ended up being so frustrated that he killed her. He drove from wherever he lived, Texas, all the way to Sacramento, killed her at work, and then I guess drove back or whatever. But if you could kind of speak on just having the children so young. Was this a black young man? Yes.
Well, do you see, in other words, there are a lot of men who are older than 21 who are distressed about having to pay child support. Now, somebody who's 21 years of age, and they are having to pay child children, 3 children, and they hardly job themselves.
Yes.
They're going to be frustrated. That's like unemployment creates a lot of frustration. I say unemployment is a form of violence. Because people who are unemployed, how are they going to live? How are they going to buy food, clothing, and shelter if they don't have money? And so the levels of unemployment in the black community is a form of violence, and it leads me to say that racism, white supremacy, that controls the unemployment amongst black people is one of the highest forms of violence. So, do you see, so you have someone who is 21 and they're with a female who's 33. I would say that the 21-year-old was himself looking for a mother if he's with somebody 33. Why is somebody 21 with somebody 33? Unless they did not have the mothering that they needed to have from the mother. And I'm not saying the mother was a bad person. I'm saying the mother may well have been a victim of racism, white supremacy circumstances. And so was he overwhelmed? Now, I'm not justifying his killing them, but to understand the logic of a 21-year-old person being overwhelmed. See, this is, again, we are not, there's nothing in the system of racism, white supremacy, that has taught black people the science of parenting under conditions of racism, white supremacy. The only thing that black people have been taught, basically by the system, because enslavement was a part of the system. Black people were brought here to produce slaves, to breed, and to produce slaves. Not to produce scientists, teachers, government officials. And so slavery was a phase of racism, white supremacy. And so we're just in an updated period where people have different clothes, but they still are in a form of enslavement under the system of racism, white supremacy. as black people, we are going to have to teach and instruct ourselves not only what to expect in the system of racism and white supremacy, but how we can bring it to an end. Because it's no such thing as the maximal development of black children and black people under the conditions of racism, white supremacy. So we have to be able to figure out what behaviors do we need to bring into play. We're not spending any time hating white people any more than somebody who wants to win a chess tournament spends time hating their opponent. No, you have to understand the game, understand the moves, and understand the counter moves to defeat the opponent. And so black people are going to have to understand that little children, young children, cannot become effective, mature parents when they haven't mastered maturity. They haven't even mastered education, haven't mastered reading, haven't mastered math. So they tell children what they haven't mastered. And children cannot raise children. And every functional society understands that. Children cannot raise children. And if we are going to help ourselves, then this is what we are going to incorporate into our knowledge and understanding of what constitutes black self-respect. That has to begin with knowledge and wisdom and understanding of environmental influences and how we need to train and program ourselves against the environmental influences that are destructive to us. So that black people will say what the black people in the past used to say, no, black people don't do that. No, black people don't act like that. You see, but now we are in a period of monkey see, monkey do. So all the system of racism has to do is put up some behavior on the television screen or the video screen, and then black people think, oh, this is what we're supposed to do next. There's an African proverb that says, monkey was so busy doing what everybody else was doing that one day monkey cut his throat. See, monkey wasn't thinking about what behaviors he needed to engage in for the maximal development of a monkey. Monkey was copying what he saw other people doing. So one day monkey killed himself. Mm-hmm. Does that in any way answer your question?
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Right on. Good to hear from our callers in the Bay Area. Other folks who have questions, don't wait till the last second. Put your hand up if you have a question for Dr. Welsing. Caller at 9451. Last four digits, 9451. Did you have a question for Dr. Welsing?
Good evening. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir. Thomas in New York.
Good evening, Gus. Good evening, Dr. Welsing. Always a pleasure and an honor to speak with you.
Good evening, yes.
You made a great observation about that Burger King burger. I saw that commercial. I didn't think of anything racist. You said something. So a great observation by you and the firefighter. Supposedly, steak sauce grilled into it for Halloween. And, yeah, they like to eat anything black. Also, I wanted to make another observation which you guys spoke about earlier. I heard that they darkened the guy's picture, not lightened it. I saw one report where it said they lightened the shooter's picture, and then I saw another report which said they darkened it. So, which leads me into my first question, about the shooter in Mr. Bryce Williams. Are you familiar with that, Dr. Wells?
No. Where was this?
He shot 2 reporters on television. He's a black male. He was fired from the television station.
Oh,
and,
yes. Who shot the people and was videotaping it at the same time?
Absolutely, that's the case. My question to you was, do you think there's a reason why they haven't released his manifesto yet? That happened some time ago, and that story has seemed to lost its steam. I would have thought that this was something that white supremacists would have really liked to show. They have actual video evidence of a crazy black man, but for some reason, they announced that he had a manifesto. They read a few lines from it. It seemed like it had to do with racism as to his motive for committing these crimes. And I just wanted to know if you felt as though the reason they haven't released that manifesto is because of the content with this inside of it.
Well, see, my question would be, now here's a black man trying to go forward, in television career. And if somebody just looked at what are the statistics about black people and their success or failure in having careers on screen and television, and what are the stats about their success versus the stats of whites being successful. And so he might have been running into what the vast majority of other black people who want to get into television or radio for that matter, if they're black, what are their opportunities, or do they experience discrimination? Like I would say there are probably no careers, jobs that a black person can go into where they are not, if they're people who classify themselves as white, where the black person is not going to run into some form of racial discrimination. And the vast majority of people who classify themselves as white in those situations will say, oh no, there's no racism here. There's equal opportunity. As a matter of fact, there will be a sign. We are equal opportunity employers. But are black people and white people actually being given the same opportunities? So I heard or read something from someone who came from the neighborhood that this young man grew up in, where there might have been a few black families, but there were racial tensions. Now, I don't know. I heard this on someone who grew up in the community that he grew up in, predominantly white community. And, you have a few blacks in the school, and what do blacks experience? And so if he has been sensitized from early in life about racial discrimination, and CNN had a program some time ago, Anderson Cooper, talking about at what age do children learn about race and practice racism, and found that 3-year-old white children are very astute in practicing racial discrimination. And so if he was one of those children, and see, black people go to white communities and white schools, the parents think their children are going to get a better education, and that's a desirable goal. But how the children are treated in that environment when they're very young is something else again. Because as a psychiatrist, I'm seeing children, black children, who were in integrated settings and the only black or one of a few blacks, And these children are not able to come home and talk to their parents who want them to be at that school about what they're experiencing. They could be too young to know how to describe it. But they are being pushed aside and shunted aside and not being treated in the same way that white children are being treated in those environments. Because white children are learning at home the racism that is taught, the survival necessity that is being taught throughout the white culture. And so I don't know whether this guy was, in other words, he talked about racism and talked about what he experienced in racism and that was somehow behind his motivation for what he did. No, I do not advocate that people do that kind of thing. But if he was feeling that he was, being ignored and rejected, what did the young man in Oregon say? His letter or his statement was that he was isolated and feeling rejected. The young man who was in Northern California, who went to school and shot people, he felt that he was being rejected. And so therefore he shot up the place. And so this guy tragically felt on the basis of race that he wasn't being treated fairly. So, do you see, so a healthy society would be saying, wait a minute, is this true? Is this actually what people are experiencing? What do we need to do to correct this so that people are not feeling this way? Do you see? I mean, it would be just like somebody investigating and looking at all of the shootings that took place in Chicago last week, or Baltimore, or New York, and the black people who are shooting each other. And if somebody said, well, now, what was upsetting you? What was stressing you? The fact that you hadn't been able to get a job in 5 years, was that upsetting you and stressing you out? See, nobody is raising those kind of questions for the black people in the urban centers who are under the 24/7 assault of racism, white supremacy. See, unemployment, chronic unemployment, is an assault. It is terrorism. It's violence against those individuals in the communities where that is rampant. So again, I would say, whatever that person in Virginia, whatever his note said, people should be studying the notes. Just like what Dylan Storm Roof, what did his manifesto say? Because he talked about race. Why he felt he had to kill black people. This recent person, he talked about race. He talked about his hostility towards black men or black people. Don't give us little segments of what's in the letter. Let's put those letters on the full screen television and say, now what are these people saying? Is this a problem? See, we are making the problem gun control. But all these people who are misusing guns and killing large numbers of people or significant numbers of people are all talking about race. So what should the wise society do? The wise society should be saying, now wait a minute. we need to talk about race. I'm even going to say President Obama, who has great reluctance to talk about race. President Obama, instead of wringing his hands about gun control, should be saying, we need to talk about race, which is racism. And we need to try to get to the bottom of this. Now, I don't know whether he's received death threats and told that he better not talk about racism. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But that's the problem.
I have one more question. Can I ask it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thomas in New York, were you going to ask your other question? Thomas in New York?
Hello, can I be heard?
Oh, okay. Yes, sir. Go ahead with your other question.
Oh, yes. She did some talking earlier about the homosexuality in the black community and the attack on the black male. And, I definitely see that in the media. But in the community, I find it, almost 2-to-1. It's way more gay black females, and it's more accepted in the community. And do you think that's also an attack? They're attacking the woman as well? And I'll mute my line. Thank you for taking my calls.
Yes. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, we are seeing, black people are seeing black children in junior high school, female children, fussing and fighting about which girl they're going with. And this is unusual behavior. And as a behavior scientist, the question, why is this happening? What is causing this? See, I have patients who are gay, and I've talked to them about you have to respect yourself. And I've also said we don't know why. The scientists don't have all of the answers as to why is this happening. Some scientists and some behavioral scientists put for discussion and say, if you're going to talk about why it's happening, you must be homophobic. But see, a viable community that is projecting itself thousands of years into the future, that culture cannot say that female-female, male-male relationships are on the same level as male-female. Because the two former, female-female, male-male, are not reproducing the future for their society. And if they say, well, we'll take care of children, children learn what you teach in the family. And so my position as a black psychiatrist, or just as a black behavioral scientist, that knows if a community decides that this is the form of sexual behavior we're endorsing for ourselves, if you feel that makes your future, fine. If another community says this doesn't make the future that we see for ourselves, it's just like the white society says racism, white supremacy is what we need to be engaged in for our survival. And the inferiorization of black people is what we have to engage in. Now, certainly, self-respecting black people can't say, well, we endorse that for ourselves. No, if we are going to survive into the future, we have to come back and seek to neutralize what the white supremacy system and culture is doing to us, because it's genociding us. And we can't certainly be expected to go along with that. So no, there is, like Neely Fuller says, that all of the areas of people activity are impacted by the system of racism, white supremacy: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. See, the majority of the sitcoms and programs for white people on the television are endorsing white male, white female relations. And so to have the very few black programs that are on sitcoms that are supposed to be about black people, and to have a heavy endorsement of male and female homosexuality, and that's one of the few, do you see, then those programs are not giving, it's not like, okay, there's a choice. Constructive black male, black female programs, we don't see that.
Right on. Appreciate that, Thomas in New York. Before I get to the other caller, again, telling folks not to lollygag. Don't wait till the last minute. If you have something you want to get clarity from Dr. Welsing on, we can do so. And again, just what Dr. Welsing just shared, in my view, that is the A-plus chess move on the part of whites, why they would give Viola Davis an Academy Award for How to Get Away with Murder. She's not married to a black male. They have her married to a white man. She leaves him, and then she gets a white woman. That's exactly what they're doing. Constant attack against black self-respect. Caller at 9298, last four digits, 9298. Did you have a question for Dr. Welsing?
Hello, this is Lady. How are you guys? How are you, Dr. Wesley?
Hi, how are you?
So I have a question, but I also have a young victim on the line who is 10 who has a question, if that is okay.
Okay, listen, I'm going to have to ask VAR to repeat it because I don't know whether my ear's wearing out, but I can hardly hear all of what you're saying.
All right. If you want to get, you said you had one person, I guess a 10-year-old, she wanted to get her question, and then you had your question. You can, I guess everyone can speak up, and I'll relay the message to Dr. Welsing.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello, doctor. My name is Jasmine, and I have two black friends at the playground, and they were adopted by two white males. My question is why two white males are allowed to go and adopt black children.
Did you hear that, Dr. Welsing?
Why are two white males allowed to adopt black children?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, that's because the society, and maybe it's different for different states, but has allowed open adoption. So anybody who, if there are children available for adoption, then anybody who they certify as being okay to adopt. And that, doesn't have, in other words, gender identification as such does not rule the persons out for adopting. But one can see, for example, that white children are not put up for adoption and given to black couples. If a black couple went in and said, I'd like to have a white child, You see, or if two black males said, I'd like to adopt a black female child, or I'd like to adopt a white male child, I would say 99.999% of the time that would not be allowed. In other words, a black male combination would not be suitable for a white child to be in that environment. And so, again, that has to do with, I would say, that all children need to be adopted, just as a psychiatrist. I would say that children need to be adopted to the extent at all possible by members of their ethnic racial group. And there are ethnic and racial groups that feel very strongly and they are able to prevail. But but this is why black people have to become conscious of when we were brought to this area of the world, we were enslaved, and we were brought to be breeders, not to produce strong families, but to be breeders for the system of enslavement, which was a phase of racism, white supremacy. And so that, because the same conditions only in a modified form continue to exist, then you have black people producing children in some instances, maybe many instances, that they're not able to take care of. And people should become very, very conscious of this, not to condemn themselves, but to really give a lot of thought to producing what I've called in the past throwaway children. Like enslavement was, being breeders. We were forced into breeding and producing throwaway children that would be sent and shipped by slave masters to other plantations, separated from their parents and sent to various plantations. And so I would say that, black people should make up their minds that are affecting our liberation, that we are not going to play with sex and produce children that become throwaway children that can be put in all different kinds of circumstances that are not consistent with the highest values of black development. So I hope you understood what I was saying.
I understand, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Thank you for your question.
Thank you for taking her call. I have a question, and I think it's like a two-part question. And I wanted to know about why is it that, in particular, I see a lot of black people have to consistently seek some type of sensory stimulation, almost like overstimulating themselves, like with the loud music, very sugary foods and beverages. Is this an addictive behavior, or is this like a way of coping with racism, white supremacy? And if it is, then how do people stop it?
Okay, well, let me respond to that. See, I think that if we understand racism is 24/7 stress on black people. And it's like a hidden stress because black people, for the most part, are not thinking that we are in a system of 24/7 stress called racism, white supremacy. Black people are taught just like everybody else in the society is taught to believe that we are in a system of democracy where everybody is equal and everybody has equal opportunity. Well, that's the deception, because we are not in a system of democracy. We're in a system of racism, white supremacy, and it's 24/7 stress. So black people are feeling stress on them, and they really have not had a clear way to state what is actually happening to them, and so being stress. And so the body looks for an outlet to relieve the stress. And that can come in the form of loud music, listening to loud music, singing and shouting in a loud manner, in churches, using drugs or using alcohol or overeating or shall say, sex obsession. These are different ways that the human being can seek, not consciously, because the person is just thinking, oh, I'm doing what I want to do. The person who is drinking and using drugs. And if the doctor says, why are you doing this? Because I like it. I'm doing what I want to do. Or as our young man said to me, look, Dr. Welsing, I'm not going to stop smoking weed because I like it. Now, what the psychiatrist understands is that there is a system of oppression that is 24/7 stress, and that the marijuana, the alcohol, the other drugs, the overeating, and all of that is a reaction from this hidden stress that nobody wants to talk about, and that black people are not allowed to talk about by the same system of oppression. So yes, these are reactions that people have that end up producing high blood pressure, diabetes, and other negative impacts on the body and then the system of health. And this is why it's important for black people to understand exactly and specifically what racism, white supremacy is, and that it is a system of stress. It is a system that causes chronic unemployment, and there's almost no greater stress on a person than being deprived the means to live. If people are kept out of a job, that is essentially saying, I am depriving you of a livelihood, the ability to live. And so these are great stresses. And usually because people don't know how to identify and recognize racism, white supremacy, because that information has been denied them, they end up taking the stress out on each other and deforming black male-female relations and other relationships that people have with one another. In other words, if they can't push back in the direction that the stress is coming from, that means like pushing up, then they push out laterally against the people who happen to be closest to them, or that they're not afraid to. In other words, the system of white supremacy in effect says it's okay for black people to harm each other. It's not okay for you to, it's not even okay for you to say Black Life Matters. I mean, we've just experienced people getting into difficulty if black people say Black Lives Matter. Oh, you shouldn't be saying that. All life matters. Well, of course, all life matters, but let black people address the fact that their lives matter, since the system of white supremacy is saying black life doesn't matter. Okay, so that's part one. I hope I've covered that. What's part two of your question?
You pretty much covered it. I guess what would be the solution for people to wean themselves off of this behavior and start being more productive? How does that process start? Do they make a list, or is it something? And I'm talking about in all areas of activity, because that kind of behavior, even I noticed it in myself with the music and stuff, is not very, it's not productive. It's counterproductive because you're seeking something, continuously, whether it be visual or whatever type of stimulus, you're seeking that instead of producing something constructive. So I guess, what would be how would someone go about discontinuing that behavior and set on the right path to producing or something constructive?
Well, I think people sharing ideas. In other words, if you find that a certain pattern of sound that you may say is music is not constructive for your functioning, then you say, now, I'm going to either turn off all sound when I'm attempting to do constructive work, or I'm going to experiment. And I'm going to see what kind of sounds can I listen to. Because there are all kinds of things that are called music. I'm going to see what gives me either motivation to do more constructive work or facilitates what it is that I am attempting to do. Like, going to the shoe store, and you might see some shoes that you initially like, and then when they bring you the shoe to put on and you try to walk in it, it hurts your foot. And so you like it, but you say, no, I don't want that. Now, some people will say, give it to me anyway. And then, their foot gets deformed. But a person who is, no, this hurts. And so, bring me another size, it hurts too. And so, no, I'll have to pass on that. This is not good for my foot and therefore my carriage and my walking. So I don't want that.
Thank you. That answers a lot.
Right on. Appreciate that, lady. See, this will probably be our last caller, the person at a blocked number. Did you have a question for Dr. Welsing? You should be on with us.
Hello?
Greetings.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. John from Texas. I just have 3 quick questions. First is that I researched that the system of capitalism is kind of like a system that has to feed off the lower class. And I've noticed that for things such as an example as how the Hispanics are getting help from Wells Fargo by being given out approximately $125 billion to help them with their homes and neighborhoods and all of the system class. With that conclusion, would you say that is correct?
I need to repeat it. Mm-hmm.
You need me to repeat it again?
I think she was talking to me, saying she wanted me to restate your question once you're done. So if you want to just continue, if you want to go ahead with your question, sir.
I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous.
Calm down. All good.
Okay. All right. So the question that I was asking is that knowing about capitalism is a system that needs to feed off the lower class. For example, when a person owns a factory, they have to hire, or they usually hire, people of the low-income class to pay them a lot less to make millions of dollars for the particular person that owns that company. So, I wanted to know if I am correct in my conclusion that is it true that because every time black people are able to jump up the social ladder. They bring in immigrants from other countries and help them so that they can keep black people as a permanent class. Therefore, there is no way for blacks to jump up the social class. We're meant to be a lower class to feed the country, and is that the reason why that all this is happening? There's no solution for us to go up the social class within the system. I just wanted to know if I'm correct in that conclusion.
Okay, let me say this. See, I start with the fact that we are in a system of racism, white supremacy. The system of racism, white supremacy is about white genetic survival. And this is why the system teaches, if you are black, get back. If you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, you're mellow. If you're white, you're all right. Now, the reason that black has to get back is because black has the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation. And so what we see happening, what we've seen happening continuously is black get back. Now, because black people haven't been dealing with their problem, I mean, initially when we were in formal slavery, black people thought if they take the chains off of us, everything is going to be all right. So that the chains of slavery were the problem. That's what we thought. And so there was emancipation, meaning removal of the chains. And then people were put in chain gangs, and there were black codes, meaning legal statutes for the mistreatment of black people and keeping black people back. And then there was a civil rights movement, and the laws were supposed to be changed, and black people thought now we are integrated and we are accepted fully in the society, only to find that things have begun to move in the reverse in the preventing of black people from voting and denying black people educational opportunities and employment opportunities, etc. And so black people were not thinking about the problem is a genetic survival problem for people who classify themselves as white. This is specifically their motivation. So now we see, once the people who classify themselves as white were told that they are getting ready to be the minority, then the people who classify themselves as white, who are in power in system of racism, white supremacy, they begin to bring in a lot of different people. Let's say bring in large numbers of Hispanics, and they say they're illegal immigrants, but I say they're not illegal. They're being brought in and told that they can have jobs. And the Hispanics were first classified as brown, and then they get in, and then they classify themselves as white and are allowed to classify themselves as white, and that increases the white number. And now they're talking about bringing in some of the displaced people from the Middle East, like Syria. And these people are going to be given jobs and various opportunities, and as you say, blacks pushed down to the bottom, or pushed down to remain at the bottom. Well, as long as the black people are talking about system of democracy, then they are bewildered as to what to do. But if black people begin to talk about, wait a minute, we understand what is happening. And so our agenda is to say that first of all, we are in, anybody that deals with black people, any elected official who wants the black vote, is going to have to acknowledge that black people are in a system of racism, white supremacy. Second point, that if you're bringing in Hispanics, if you're bringing in people from the Middle East or any place else in the world, you can give them all the jobs that you want. But black people are going to demand that they be given jobs if the government itself has to be the employer of last resort. And instead of black men spending their frustration buying and selling drugs, then they began to protest and demand that they are going to have employment. They demand not that going to jail and selling drugs and, committing crimes as a response, unconscious response to the pressures of the system of racism, white supremacy, that black men and black women, black people are going to articulate that they have knowledge and understanding of the system of racism. They have knowledge and understanding of white genetic survival being the primary motivation, and that they demand jobs, just like they had jobs when there was high-level unemployment for white people during the Great Depression under President Roosevelt, that we are demanding that. And so all the politicians, Hillary Clinton and the different people who want the black vote, black people should be saying, sit down, we're willing to have a discussion with you. You say you want the black vote, and the black vote is critical if the Democrats are going to get elected. Well, if you want the black vote, then you're going to have to acknowledge that we are in a system structure of racism, and you're going to have to commit to the government being the employer of last resort, because to have high-level unemployment amongst black people is no different than terrorism, because people and families cannot function when men don't have jobs or women don't have jobs, or where men don't have jobs, because if men don't have jobs, they cannot be husbands and they cannot be fathers. So that's what I would have to say to that. I hope that that at some level answers your question.
Yes, it does, Doctor. I just have one last question, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Before I get to that question, I just wanted to ask Brother Gus, are you doing workplace racism today or no?
Am I doing what?
I think that was for me. He has another question for you, Dr. Welsing, but I think he just had a quick question about the program for me. Workplace racism, that's on Saturdays for the compensatory call-in. So if you have something, maybe you can just jot it down, make a note, and then save it for Saturday. You can email it to me as well, untiljustice@gmail.com. That's my email, untiljustice@gmail.com, if you want to email it in or save it for next weekend for workplace racism.
Okay, thank you. All right, last question. Dr. Welsing, do you think that sexual selection is being used in the tactics against us, such as destroying our images, which leads to some of our people, some men and some women that I've seen creating groups on Facebook, such as like Team White Boys and stuff like that, meaning that certain people within within this country that are black choose to only date outside of their race on purpose due to the tactics of sexual selection by the country used against us.
Laval, please repeat that for me. I'm sorry.
He said that right now, like he sees groups of black people, and they only date, only are in sexual relationships with people that are not black. So it'll be either black guys, and they only want to date white girls or other girls that are not black. Same thing. If it's black females, they will date white boys or just, anybody that is not a black person. He's saying, how do you think that this is coming about? Is this as a result of, trying to way he phrased it in terms of the system of racism that we're in terms of what's producing this, what's making this happen, where these groups are only choosing to date people that are not black?
Okay. One of the major products of the dynamic of racism, white supremacy, is teaching black self-hatred. Do you see? In the black self-hatred, as it feeds down into what's beautiful and mate selection. And so black people begin to consciously, subconsciously turn against themselves and one another. Do you see? Or looked at another level, because of the distortions, and primarily the distortions in terms of the ability to have jobs and to function. And so when you take unemployment, and especially male unemployment, out of the picture, then male-female relationships become extremely distorted, because people think that relationships are about love. But if people are in serious about mating and producing families, then you're talking about a financial institution that requires that people have jobs and employment to take care of the bills that develop in marital and family life. And so when there's failed unemployment, then you're going to have the collapse of marriage, or you're going to have all kinds of dissension in the marital state. And so first people then move to not getting married, but the pressures are still there, because they think that they can take care of children and not be together as husband and wife, mother and father. And so the whole thing begins to collapse. Out of this, because there's no understanding of racism, then people subconsciously start thinking, if I had a mate of another color, that everything would be fine. And this is why you have, I say, thousands of black women looking at Scandal, do you see, which is essentially the same relationship that white slave masters had with black women in formal slavery. But there is a subconscious hunger for relating to men that seem to have power. Do you see, have jobs and can function. See, this is what females look for if they are thinking about, and they don't have to think about it consciously, just subconsciously. If I'm going to become a mother and have children that I have to take care of, then I need a mate. And I need a mate that has power and that can function. But the system of racism, white supremacy says to us, all as black people, you're not going to have power. And you're not going to be able to have healthy families, because then that would be competition and a threat to white genetic survival. So to the extent possible, I'm going to destroy that. Now, when we become sophisticated in our knowledge of the system of racism and the knowledge of black self-respect that is going to defeat racism, then we will begin to make other choices. But when, this whole system is talking about mixed race, knowing that mixed race people in a system of racism are conflicted and alienated from being black, because it's like, if it weren't for the black parent, I could have been all white. I almost was all white, and now I'm mixed race. I'm really black as far as white supremacy is concerned, but I'm thinking of myself as mixed race. I'm alienated from blacks. So white supremacy says, you'll be a good tool that I can use. I'm going to give you a good job because you are conflicted and ambivalent about race. I think of you as black, but you don't think of yourself as black. So I'm going to use your structured mentality. So I'll have a black face, but I'll have a black person that is alienated at a deep level against black. So I can use you as a tool in maintaining my system of racism, white supremacy. I mean, that almost goes back to Roman times when Rome went into Africa, they knew that creating a mixed race group of people would help them maintain power over the black population or the dark population that they were conquering.
That answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Olson. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your call.
Right on. I hope folks got constructive information for your Sunday evening. Maybe we can get the week off to a great start. I know you said you went to the bookstore today before you exit. Did you get anything new to read? Did you add anything new to Dr. Welsing's reading list?
I bought a book by Martin Amis, A-M-I-S, and the book is called A Factor of Interest, but it's a novel about Nazi Germany.
Wow, I think
interestingly, I read something about this author where he was being interviewed on France 24 television, and they were asking him what was he going to write about next. And he said, I may write about America because it's the most racist country in the world.
Wow. Wow.
So, I said, well, this is interesting. I have not read his work before. So this is A Factor of Interest by Martin Amis, A-M-I-S.
A Factor of Interest. Outstanding. I will check that out. I was laughing. I think it was either the last time or one of the earlier times this year you were on, and you were again encouraging folks, reading is more important than watching television.
And watch TV.
And specifically, you were saying one of the topics you can read about consistently, Nazi Germany. Go back and study, see what happened in. Those lessons apply now. I was not surprised at all that you would be reading a book on that subject, but I'll check. I know you said before that you don't read a lot of novels, so I'll definitely check that out.
Right, and I don't. Right.
Wow. Fascinating. As I always say, I know, and I speak for tons of our listeners who listen to the program and who've heard you many times over the years, just really appreciate you taking a chunk out of your Sunday evening. You could have been working on other things, or reading, or researching. Just always really, really, we're super grateful for being able to hear your thoughts, your views on the system of white supremacy, and try as best we can to apply your insight to our daily lives, how we think, speak, act, and deal with this system. So just thank you again. Please take excellent care of yourself, and we will definitely be looking forward to being able to speak with you sometime soon, Dr. Welsing.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. And, a psychiatrist wants people to face reality, even when it's difficult. So that's my function.
Amen. Thank you for helping us do so, Dr.
All
Welsing.
right.
Enjoy your evening.
Bye now.
Take care. Context of white supremacy, A Factor of Interest. I'm going to check that out as soon as we get off the program, see if I can track down a copy. I might put that on my reading list, my After Katrina reading list, once I'm once I have read a sufficient amount of material dealing with that, then we'll move forward. If there are folks who are down to read this one, let me know, and once I get my hands on a copy, we can do so. Take some notes if we have folks that are interested in doing so. A Factor of Interest. A Factor of Interest. Martin Amis, I think he said, is the author's name. With that, we should be here, at minimum, we'll be here on Wednesday. Pam should be with us. Trojan Horse, Death of a Dark Nation, the Interracial Con Game, the Beauty Con Game. I think Miss Black Love is a revolutionary act. You can check out the blog, racismws.com. Pam will be with us on Thursday, and then we have a white man, one of our listeners, not retired firefighter, but a different listener in Florida, said that they saw there was a organization, they were trying to work against racism in Florida, and they had this white guy who was a member of the group. I think it was mostly black people in the group, but they had this one white guy who had glommed on and was doing whatever he was doing. He was like, you should try to get this one white guy on the program to see, what is he about? Why is he with this group? How did he attach with this group? What is his purpose for being there? And I contacted him. He should be with us this coming Thursday. So at minimum, we'll be here Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday this week. We might be here, I guess, the 2 days prior to that. You'll just have to check to see if we're here either Monday or Tuesday before then. Anywho, I hope folks got constructive information from Dr. Welsing. Always a hoot to have her on the program. I don't watch Empire. She was the one that told me about all the stuff. She told me on Thursday when I talked to her about Al Sharpton being on and the cage and the gorilla and all of that, which just further that's why I'm not going to watch the show at all. But hopefully folks should at least be appreciative they got to hear some of Dr. Welsing's commentary. Invest if you think the program is constructive. Racism-notes.blogspot.com. Racism-notes.blogspot.com. Listener-supported counter-racist radio. PayPal button is in the top right corner. If you're not into PayPal, drop us an email and we'll get you a physical mailing address. The email is untiljustice@gmail.com. Thanks to all the folks who have supported us, kept us on the air, closing in on 7 years of broadcasting. Again, hopefully, as a result of the cows, listeners, non-white listeners, are getting a much more accurate, comprehensive understanding of what racism is, how it works, and what it means to be white. Thanks for the folks who listened in live. Thanks for the folks listening to the archives. Share the broadcast with other non-white people if you think it will help them become less confused about racism. We'll be back at minimum on Wednesday. We'll encourage folks remain codified at all times. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white terrorism. You definitely don't want to be around any intoxicated white folks. I would even say be cautious about being around intoxicated non-white people. Definitely no alcohol if you're going to be behind the wheel, even if you're going to be a passenger or even a pedestrian. Race soldiers are just always, and white people period, are just always on the lookout to make problems for us. That's what racism is. It's constant war against black people. Do everything you can to be in mind to just make the best possible decisions to take care of yourself, people that you care about. Buckle up every time you're in the vehicle. Do everything we can to minimize contact with race soldiers. With that, we will be back in, I guess that's about 72 hours. Thanks again for tuning in. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of racism. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
No problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Even my conditioning has been conditioned.